Thank you, thank you, thank you. Welcome once more to our Aurum Consultants product podcast. Today, the 24th of October. We are glad to be with you. We are glad for you to be with us today. To all our listeners and our viewers, karibuni sana. My name is Anthony Kuria. Today, I'm your host for this podcast, and we have our two guests. We have Zipporah Kuria, who is a HR consultant, and we have Augustus Kioko, a risk expert. Welcome. Karibuni sana, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Now, today, we have a big topic that we want to discuss, and I don't even think we'll be able to finish it today, but we will work on it properly. If you're listening to us and you'd like to post comments, views, whatever it is that you may have, probably we want to understand better, you have questions, please post them. We would be glad to be able to highlight them, to discuss them, and to have a conducive environment for discussion. Now, today we want to discuss about mitigating risks in the workplace. That's our topic today. And I believe Zippy and Augustus, you guys have enough points that you could discuss with us from a HR and from a risk perspective. Let me start with Zipporah. The first question that I will bring in is, what are some of the risks or potential risks that face a business? I mean, just generally.
Thank you, Anthony. Good morning, viewers. Good morning, our audience. Before I respond to your question, Anthony, I think it's important for us to, first of all, ask ourselves this question as business owners, as HR professionals. What is the risk, or what are the potential risks that face our businesses? So I think we need to start from a place of understanding what are the risks, or what would be the potential risks in the first place. Sure. Then if I was to respond to your question, then I would say there's quite a number of risks that would pose to any business. Number one, I would say the first risk would be people-related risk. And people-related risk would include employees, it would include suppliers, it will include vendors or people who are working into your business. So that is number one, people risk. The other risk I will talk about is compliance risks. In any environment, you find there are compliance regulations. So again, the reason there are those regulations is because there are risks that come with the compliance issues. The other one will be security or fraud risks. Again, when you look at the human risk, again, gives you an element of fraud risk. So that's another potential risk for us business owners. The other risk I would probably mention would be reputational risk. Again, when you're dealing with people, you're dealing with employees. Of course, there are risks that would come that are related to your reputation. How you handle clients. If you have a disgruntled client, then how are these things handled? Because again, it becomes a reputation risk, depending on how these issues are handled. And of course, we have also operational risks, where again, you find within the organization, you have to manage the business in different aspects. So in the process of managing that business, the operational angles of the business. So those operations come with risks as well. So those are a few of the risks that I would think off my head. I'm sure Mr. Kioko has more to add on to that.
Yes, Mr. Augustus, from your perspective, looking at your perspective, what do you think are some of the risks that typically would affect a business?
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Tony and Zipporah and the audience from wherever you are joining us from. Risk. I think just to give a background, risk, and just to be able to demystify, risk. A lot of times when you hear of risk, we think of a bad thing. Yeah. Even the name itself, sounds like it's a bad thing to the business. But one of the things that risk do, and maybe just to be able to demystify the risk, is just within the risk, there is a threat and an opportunity, in business. Yeah. So risk is good, and we should all embrace risk. If you are in business world, whatever you do, even in your house, there are all potential risks. Yeah. Anything you do daily, your staff in the office, handling those files, handling customers, processes, systems, they are all potential risk inherent in those processes, inherent in those systems, inherent in operations and all that. But Zipporah has mentioned a lot of them. Maybe we are reading from the same, script, but those are some of the risks she has been able to mention. But if I can add, there are many, and there are also emerging risks. We are in the period of pandemic. There is no other time. The word risk has been so, loudly pronounced than this time. This pandemic has exposed the underbelly of the organizations where we work, our systems, our processes, our operations, and people. And Zipporah has mentioned about the people risk, but within it, there are many risks in it. I would call it human capital risks, and that, to me, this is the biggest risk. Because for any business, that believes in success and its success, it must believe in its people. So these people come, other things. This is the only risk that is, can be flexible. This is the only risk that can vary. This is the only risk. We talk of systems. Systems are designed and they are there to stay until maybe we decide we want to change. But when you talk about people are complex in nature. So within it, there's within the people risks, the human capital risks, you could find a lot of risks within, workplace culture, you're talking of employment related lawsuits, theft, training, turnover, succession planning, all these are risks that have to do with people. But we have economic risks, and we've also, within this period, we've experienced where companies were not able to operate. They have shut down. They have shut down because the economic environment is hostile. That's an economic risk. Of course, you talk about things like competition risks. You are in business and you're not the only one having that idea that you have and that business you are running. So there is competition, and organization must view competition as a risk and as a potential risk to the business. We've seen companies, on this area of competition risks, we've seen companies close down, big giants, Nokia, Kodak, that, and just not being able to identify this as a risk and stay ahead of that risk. So I think those are some of the risks I would mention. Of course, Zipporah had mentioned the other risks, and there could be as many as environment keep changing, because business environment is dynamic. It keeps changing every day, and a risk, something that was not a risk before, is now being identified as a risk. Yeah.
Wow. I think Augustus and Zipporah, Zippy, you've really broadly brought into business, and to our listeners who are running their businesses. It's good for you to be able to, to map as much as possible all the risks that you would face as a company. And if I break it down, the risks that have been mentioned here include people risk, or what Augustus you've called human capital risks. We have compliance risks. As a business, you've got to comply with the government regulations, with the local authority. Depending on the business you are in, you also need to meet the statutory requirements by, if you're In consulting, for example, if you're doing construction, you need guidelines that have been placed by the professional bodies. So those are also risks that you need to take care of. You've talked about reputational risks, which involve both the human capital, your clients, your suppliers, your vendors, your customers. That can, depending on how you handle it, that can be a very big risk. We've talked about operational risk. Now, these are internal processes and systems, how you are handling your things within the business itself. Are they streamlined? Are there things that can bring disruptions? We've talked about emerging risks, things that are coming up, day after day after day. Something, as Augustus, you've said, something that was not a risk yesterday, today becomes a risk. Like now, currently the world is grappling with this COVID-19 pandemic. Before November last year, that story, we did not know what COVID means. But now, if you're an airline, you can imagine if you're a supermarket, if you're in the business, in whatever line, actually it has affected everywhere. It's a risk that has emerged that has thoroughly disrupted business models. It has disrupted supply chains. It has disrupted, entire industries. Then we've talked, which is tied now to economic risk. And then finally, Augustus, you've mentioned about competition risk. This one, irrespective of where you are, if you're in business, competition exists, even if not directly. People have a choice. I would want to bring the issue of if I was a state-owned monopoly like Kenya Power. Let me give an example, or Kengen. Probably you'd say, what competition risk is there? But somebody might decide I'm not using Kengen anymore. I'm not using power supplied by the government. I'll put solar panels and I will supply myself, and that's it. I don't need Kenya Power. So if a good number of people think in that direction, then a monopoly may lose business because clients have pivoted. So the risks in the business, what our conclusion is, risks in the business are many and varied. And as a business person, you've got to be ready. You've got to know, you've got to map, and you've got to be prepared. Now, my second question. Again, I'll start with Zipporah. I'll ask her to give us an idea, to give us her view. As a business owner or director, how do I identify risk or potential risks to my business?
First, let me start by saying, like Mr. Kyoko said, where there are business risks, there are also opportunities. And it makes me want to look at this from an angle of doing a SWOT analysis for my business to understand what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, what are the threats, what are the weaknesses, and what are the opportunities. I believe with any risks, they come from an angle of a weakness. Where you find there are weaknesses, then it poses risks. So I need to identify what are the weaknesses in my business because they will pose potential risk and threat. And then how do I address those issues? How do I look, like you said, how do I pivot? I mean, if I'm feeling I'm a monopoly, no one is in the business I'm in, how do I ensure that risk of competition, risk of being comfortable in what I'm doing, doesn't catch up with me and I end up becoming irrelevant in the industry I'm operating in? So I need to ask myself those hard questions and not stay like, nothing is happening around me, because a lot is happening. So in terms of just looking at how do I identify these risks, I need to analyze the sources that trigger problems in my business. So where are these weaknesses coming from? Where are these challenges coming from? What are the triggers? So I need to identify those triggers and understand, are they internal, are they external? So that, again, I know what processes or what I need to put in place to mitigate these challenges. The other thing I would say is act now. Don't wait for a problem or a potential problem to become a real problem for you to take action on it. Now, when you realize it's a weakness, it's a potential problem. So don't sit there and do nothing about it, because if you sit and do nothing about it, eventually it will become a problem. Eventually it will become a realized risk. So how do I de-risk? How do I make sure I'm not caught up in that situation? It means I need to ask the moment I realize this is a potential challenge. And the other thing is, I would say, if I'm dealing with people, I'm dealing with human beings. Sometimes as business owners, we think we have all the solutions. Unfortunately, we don't. And that's the reason why we need to hire people who are probably even potentially brighter than we are. The reason being because we need to involve people in our business. We need to get people to help us think through the things that we are doing. We need to get people to help us identify the challenges that are within their departments. So I might be the CEO of an organization, but I cannot be everywhere, which is the reason that, I have key pillars in different departments. So involve those people. Let them help you identify what are the potential challenges in that department, what are the potential risks they are foreseen in that department, and potentially give you actually options or give you solutions to those potential challenges. That way, there's inclusion in your whole team. The team is not feeling we are faced with these challenges, but it's only the director who comes up with solution. Because the moment you approach it from that angle, employees take a backseat. So when there's a problem, they will not deal with it. So involve your people in identifying the risk and show them this is how we mitigate these risks in our business.
Wow, good. Those are very good points, ZP. Augustus, from your perspective, what do you think? How do business people identify risks to their businesses?
Yeah. Let me say, thank you. Let me say risk management is, just to start my contributions to that question. It's very important that every business embraces, and places risk management at the center of their business operations. Because, business is operating in a very dynamic environment, which changes over time. We have legislations changing over time. Laws and regulations of the country, for example, changing every time. We have competition changing every time. We have people like now, we have, because of pandemic, you have new issues like working from home. How do you ensure those employees working from home are your employees while working at home? So if they fall in their house and get injured, that's a risk. How are you going to take care of it? Will you say they are at home while they were working for you? Those are all issues and there are potential risks to lawsuits, and litigations. A company can find itself. I remember a friend of mine told me he was hired as an MD, and immediately stepped into that company, was faced with close to 1,000 lawsuits to be able to sort, and he was his mission was to come and turn around the company, but he finds lawsuits, which have a potential of just getting you losing your focus and focusing on the lawsuits, and before the time is gone and you have delivered nothing. So those are, the risk management, must be at the center of every organization. Right now, organizations are more aware of risks. They are employing experts, like Zipporah said, employ an expert to be able to identify, because it's a risk management is an expert area. For us who are trained in insurance, insurance is risk. It's about handling risk. Actually, we'll see in the next question, we'll tackle that, whereby it's a risk mechanism, way of dealing with it. It's a mitigation, process and measure. So you have to hire an expert. Nowadays there are risk managers being trained all over, just to be able to scan. Their daily job is just to look at the business processes, their daily risk and compliance. In the insurance industry, we call them risk and compliance. They look at the business you are doing, whether you are collecting enough premiums, whether you are risk. Even now, you talk about in the banking sector, There was a law, I think that was passed last year, and talked about if a bank loans, and the bankers listening may confirm, if a bank gives loans, like for example, for 1 billion, they must also put aside equivalent. They must also capitalize that debt, just in case they are bad debts and bad and unperforming loans. It's all about risk. Insurances have also been advised, through by the regulator. If you are not able to collect your premiums at the end of the year, you have to put equivalent money aside, just to ensure that stakeholders and shareholders' money is not affected by your inability to collect premiums and debts out there. This is all about risk. We are talking about risk-based underwriting and insurance, whereby your risks, your assets must be, equal to the liabilities that are out there, your claims and all these big things. So this requires an expert. It's a technical area. Yes. You have also to consult, to conduct internal research. Sometimes you have to conduct internal research over your processes, external research. You can also identify risks through audit. Audit can, the annual audits we do, organizations do. There are recommendations, and there are areas where, auditors are able to recommend where your risks are high, where your risks are low. They are able to give you a risk matrix to show how risks in various areas, the level of your risk, whether they are high, low, or medium. And from there, probably from the annual audit, you are able to identify potential risk to your business. Sometimes you analyze customer complaints. Nowadays, there is an organization that are doing what? Customer feedback. You are given papers to fill. You go to the banks and you are given papers to fill and just how was our service, Or even now we are getting, because of digitalization, we are getting, if you pay like, make a payment like in Java or some of these outlets, you are getting a message, asking and soliciting responses from you. It's an online survey. And out of that, they are able to compile and see whether our service is good, because that's a risk. If you are operating businesses and your customers are not satisfied, then your business stands at risk. There are, of course, you break down the big picture and you make the risk management as a culture of the organization. It has to be at the center of what you do. A lot of times we put other processes at the top, but we forget about, as long as we are in business, we are in risks daily. And there's any risk has potential to close us, shut down us, or even affect us. Even when talk about employee risks, are your employees happy, to work for you? Because if they are not happy, what will happen? Somebody used to tell me a long time, my former boss used to tell me, the people who serve the king must be very happy, the loyalists. Just imagine the people, the presidential bodyguards, if they are not happy, what can happen? So the king might suffer. So even in organization, the king, the loyal, the staff who serve who wake up every day to come to the office and serve clients, are the loyalists, are the servants who serve the king, and the king is the customer. So if they are not happy, it's a risk. So you have to think about ways of making them happy, ways of creating, you're talking of a safe working environment. It's safe. They feel safe when they are there, emotionally and physical, and they are able to give their best. So if that is not well taken care of, that is also another risk in your business.
Wow.
I think, Anthony, if I could actually add to what Augustine said, on the issue of regulation, a lot of us employers actually get caught up in this scenario where we don't understand the different regulations that govern our businesses. And that could be from operations to dealing with employees, entirely the legal framework. Now, if I look at it from a people perspective in terms of regulation, what I have realized, most of us don't even understand these regulations. Most of us don't understand simple things like we need to register our workplace with the Ministry of Labor. We need to be known that we exist and we have employed people. Many people don't know that simple truth. It's a very simple license, but many people don't even know that regulation.
Yes.
Yet it's actually connected to the regulation that has to do with WIBA. If you get an employee injured or dying in the organization, then that regulation actually governs how you're going to handle all these things. The other regulation, for instance, I've realized many people don't know how to handle are things like simple returns to the National Employment Authority, and this is a law. But most employers, we don't know these are areas we need to be compliant in. And what happens actually, these things cause risks that would become potential litigations, not only with employees, but even with the government. So again, the area of compliance and legal issues is a major risk as employers we need to be fully aware about. And like Mr. Kyoko has said, a risk is not necessarily a bad thing. I think it becomes a bad thing when it's not mitigated and when you don't put measures in place to ensure those risks don't become a problem.
Yeah.
Awesome. Those are very powerful points. I like the fact that Augustus, Mr. Kyoko has said something that I thought I must highlight, that risk management ought to be at the center of an organization's strategy. I mean, that one ought to be framed and put somewhere. That risk management ought to be at the center. Because think about it, like Zipporah, the way you've put it, issues to do with you're a business person. You've gotten a business name, you've registered with the government, you've gotten your certificate of incorporation, you have your bright business idea, you have the capital to begin, but then there's something called compliance. You've got to have a checklist of all the things that you need to comply with, depending on what you're doing. And the most basic, whether you are starting a shop, or you are starting a kiosk, or you're starting a restaurant, whatever, even if it's a consultancy, is workplace registration. I mean, I'll be honest with you, guys, and ladies and gentlemen. I learned about this much later after I had begun my business life. I didn't know that when you start a business, beyond all those things, meeting with the Nairobi, the county council, registering to get a business license. Okay, you've registered with the regulator if you're in consultancy. If you're going to hire employees and you need to take care of them, as you get a cover to ensure them you're meeting the statutory requirements of WIBA, Workplace Injury Benefits, then you need to register as a workplace. That's a very powerful point. If you're listening to us and you'd like to understand where do we begin as a business owner? It begins with making sure that you've met all the necessary government requirements of registration. Now, you've talked about Zip, you spoke about triggers of problems, internal and external, doing a SWOT analysis as a business, acting now on potential weaknesses, appreciating that your staff are a resource for helping you de-risk. We appreciate the comments that are coming in. Douglas Nyamori, thank you for encouraging us. You're saying you're enjoying the session. Thank you for logging in and enjoying it. I believe we are discussing a few things that are of benefit. Now, Augustus, you spoke something to do with internal research on processes and the fact that if you have risk specialists in your business, if you're a big enough business, you probably have external auditors. You might have one or two persons who are internal auditor. Now, picture an SME, a company having 10, 15 employees. They probably can't afford to have an internal auditor to handle that. Do you have suggestions? Because many of the people listening to us, small business owners, or even they are medium-sized, they're thinking, okay, I need a practical solution to having somebody internal to be able to handle that. Could you, Augustus or Zipporah, do you have suggestions on who, as a business owner, can delegate or can give responsibility for monitoring internal processes and noting risks as they come up. Probably
Let me.
Okay.
Yeah, go, Kyoko.
Go.
Yes.
So I think for any level of business, level of business, whether media, SMEs, and all that, there are many ways of doing that in terms of because if you don't do it, you are also doomed. Because as long as you are in business,
yes,
you are handling risks every day. And of course, there's as we talk about in the next maybe question, yes, about ways of mitigating these risks. There is one, I don't want to jump ahead of myself, but there is one way called avoidance. And what it means is you can see no evil, no ear, no ear, no evil. Yeah. Yes. Whereby you can decide to ignore their risks, and risk exists, but yes, it's a bad way of dealing with risk, because the fact of the matter is the risks are there. Like you are saying, you need someone. So sometimes, because you may not have the manpower to pay an qualified internal auditor, qualified risk and compliance officer, and you know that they are very rare also, the risk and compliance yes, experts. But you can outsource, you can hire so that they can be doing periodical reviews. At the end of there are many people outside here looking, they are called hustlers. They are looking for, they are trained in auditing, they are trained in risk, and they can be able to periodically to come and look through your books, look through your systems. Because when you start a business, let me say, you have an ambition to grow. You are starting business not just for the sake of doing business, but you have ambitions to grow and to prosper. Yes. So you have to have the big picture in terms of it, and you can get people outside there doing auditing or risk expert and advice at a negotiated fee, just for the sake of your business to be able to grow to the level that you are aiming at. Otherwise, you may close down just because of fear of spending, but fail to reach your goals or fail to reach the next level. So it's just a question of cost, which a business may be able to negotiate with a small time. I'm not saying you have 15 staff or your turnover is just 1 million per month and you want to hire Pricewaterhouse, PwC or Deloitte or KPMG, the big five. But you can get other small people who can be able to identify. So it's inevitable that you can avoid that area.
Awesome. Hey, that's powerful. That's a very good point to look at. That you can hire, you can outsource, you can get the mini PwCs or Deloitte, risk, people who are auditors who periodically can come and look at your business. You can negotiate a price. So for our business people who are listening out there, look at it from a perspective of I can be able to handle certain matters in a certain way, and get somebody to come just look through my business, identify areas of risk, and then give me solutions on how I'd be able to mitigate that. Zippy, I don't know whether you have something you can contribute to that.
I think what I was going to say was, as a business person, number one, I need to understand my business well. I need to understand what is it that I am actually doing and what is it that I'm actually offering out there. Now, some of us might not have as many employees. So like Mr. Kyoko has said, there's an option of outsourcing and you don't have to outsource expensively. But even before you get to the place of outsourcing, I think it's important for you to also utilize your internal resources. The people you have, you are placed in the different departments. Ask them those questions. What are the opportunities? Do a SWOT analysis with them. Look at the business entirely, break it down to the department, do a SWOT analysis with them. Actually, let them think out of the box as your employees to understand this is what the business is looking at achieving. These are our challenges, or these are our threats, these are our opportunities, and these are our weaknesses from an internal perspective. Then slowly probably start putting in place simple processes, simple SOPs that don't necessarily need an expert to come and help you do. Now, when you start putting those simple things in place, it will help you mitigate potential challenges that might come. And when they come, at least you have a basis of resolving them. Now, as the business grows, of course, the challenges might grow. And now this is where now you start needing to bring in experts who will help you strengthen your processes, who will help you strengthen your teams, and make sure these challenges or these risks are mitigated on a timely manner.
Good points. Good points. Those are very good points that you've brought up.
Tony,
yes.
what maybe just to add there what Zipporah is doing, is saying, I'll just say this: business demands will dictate, will dictate the need for experts and advice. So it's as you grow, if you are like, you cannot start, you have 2 people or 3 people, you are on your own, and you want to look for services of, PwC and all the likes. But the business demands will drive you to the next level, of risk management.
Yes. Thank you, Augustus. Thank you, Zipporah. Those are good points that you've brought in there. Issues to do with how to mitigate risk. You can use your employees as as sounding boards to be able to do a SWOT analysis and find out what is it that we are facing, what are the challenges that are coming in, and using that now to be able to plug in tools as they come up. And as you grow, you can, in addition to using your employees, you can also get somebody external periodically to come in. You may not necessarily have to hire them, but they can come in as advisors for auditing. Now, to go to our final question, and I know we have spoken a bit about this. Put very simply, how can you mitigate these risks? Zippy, we can start with you. How can you mitigate these risks?
Let me first start by saying we need to agree that we cannot 100% eliminate risks.
Yes.
Risks will always be there. However, what we can mitigate, we can put measures in place to minimize the potential risks. And one of the ways to mitigate this, number one, I would say, is to avoid the risk. There are some circumstances where you are able to completely avoid the risk. And, you can think of alternatives where you find this is too risky, think of other options. The other thing would be prevent the risk. And you prevent the risk by putting measures in place, putting policies in place, putting systems in place to ensure if these risks then do happen, there's a clear way of how to handle the same. And I would also say contain the risks. If it happens, you need to have a way of containing these risks. I'm thinking about this current pandemic. It poses a greater risk to most of us business people. Most of us have had to allow employees to work from home. Most of us have had to allow employees to carry laptops home. So what happens? They're having to access actually systems from wherever they're working from. If they're cyber, I don't even know whether they are able to work from home. And what are the risks of such an arrangement where your data is prone to being hacked? So as a company, what do? You need to put in things like firewalls. So this is a risk that you might not entirely be able to contain. It might happen, but you can mitigate it by making sure you have strong firewalls in place that anyone trying to hack into the system is not going to be an easy walk to do that. So those are some of the things I think you can be able to do to mitigate. Yes, risks will happen, but how do you minimize those risks? Then again, it doesn't affect the business. When I look at again the COVID scenario, most of us again were caught up in this scenario. We've never been in a situation where COVID has happened, people are having to close business or reduce their operations, and it has affected cash flows. How do we mitigate financial risks going forward? How do we ensure another pandemic coming and hitting my business, I will not be caught up in this situation? How do I mitigate that? What measures do I need to start putting in place to ensure this doesn't happen? Reminds me of the class we were doing earlier today with the young generation and how to manage their financial issues. You know, how do I ensure as a business I have money that is invested or put aside for challenging times, because challenging times will come, you know, and they could be threats to my business. So how do I ensure those issues are covered up?
Okay. Augustus, what's your take? How to mitigate risks?
Yeah, I agree with Zipporah that the reason why you cannot be able to eliminate risk, that's true, and that's why we talk of mitigating. Mitigating is just reducing the impact. You know, we talk of insurance, we talk about severity of an incident. You know, in terms of financial terms, and also in terms of the extent of damage and all that it can do. So I think she has articulated well. There is avoidance where eliminate or withdraw from or not become involved. You just live like there is no risk in this world. But it's maybe it won't cost you anything to involve your resources, but it's also not very recommended way because the risks are there. The fact that you're ignoring doesn't mean avoiding that they are not there. So reduction, that is just optimize or mitigate. And then there is a retention whereby you accept the risk and budget for it, And then there is the final one, and this has to do with where I spent my daily life doing as a way of mitigating risk. It's called sharing or risk transfer. This is where you outsource or you insure. You talk about insurance. Insurance is about risk. It's a good way and appropriate way of managing your risks. For example, you take insurance for your staff. If they get injured, they will get compensated. If they get injured, they, like when you talk of work injury benefits, WIBA, which we call WIBA in the insurance terms, this is insurance for, and I think for our listeners who are listening us this podcast, you can explore and get more details from Aurum, who are also insurance people, on this, because it's very important. If you have employees, it's an act, meaning the government, so it's necessary to legislate and give it a legal backing, such that your employees, if your employees don't have WIBA, they can sue you when they get injured. And the compensations can be very hefty. And this compensation money will come from your business. Just imagine your employees traveling somewhere, like 10 of them, for work assignments, and they're involved in an accident, and God forbid all of them perish. What are you going to do? It can wipe out your entire investments, because their relatives will go to court to seek compensation. The court awards can be way up there. So it's a risk. If you don't insure your employees, you can WIBA, or you can take what we call personal accident, group personal accident, which takes care of your employees while at the workplace or away, maybe at home or traveling for their own issues. And this, you talk of group life. This is a life product where if employees die out of natural illness or causes, they can be compensated. And this is, if you don't have some of this insurance, they do not attract the best to you. You'll always be getting, mediocre employees, because cheap is expensive. You may not want to invest in them. Cheap is expensive. You may fail to invest in them so that you spend less, So insurance is one of the best way, and there are many insurances to do this. You can take pension on behalf of, you can be paying pension for them, so that when they leave, they see you as a very responsible employer. When they leave organization, they will have something to take care of them at old age. You talk of medical covers, because, and again on WIBA, let me just talk on WIBA. This also, when your employees are injured and are away, You also get compensated for the days you've been paying them and they are away at home. This policy and insurance make sure your finances are safeguarded. They are not at risk. Because when an employee is away, because they are injured, some roles you may get a replacement, and maybe on cash or basis. So you might be, without this insurance, you might be spending, double salary because you have to hire an extra replacement, and the other employees at home, and you are paying. So you are paying double, and you are in business. It's not a good thing. You talk about medical insurance. You take medical insurance for your staff, for their physical and emotional wellness. Nowadays, we don't call it medical insurance. We call it healthcare because it's a holistic approach. There's an holistic approach to physical and mental and emotional wellness of your employees. So, and because you are not able to do this, you are not able to set aside money so that whenever they get injured, you can compensate them from that fund. Or whenever they can get sick, you take money out of your accounts and take them to hospital. Because you are not able to handle that risk as a business, that's where you opt to do what we call transfer or share this risk with someone, with an expert. And the expert here is the insurance people, companies who are able to shoulder you that burden and take up that risk for you. Now, if you do not have that insurance, you will find even in your own personal life, you need insurance for yourself. In the house, people get injured in the house. We don't live in fear, but these are realities of life. People get sick. Your parents, your whole parent in charge get sick, and the bills, accumulate, and you have high bills. What are you going to do? So you are encouraged to transfer this risk from you to an insurance. Maybe you will take care of your parents at old age. Nowadays, you have seen if you call an Arambi, sometimes you are not able to, you spend a lot, and maybe people are not, you may not get that money, that you want. But there are people you can transfer this risk expert so that they can manage. So our listeners, we urge you to look into this area of insurance for your children, education policy. You don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. As again, I said, we do not fear about the future, but these are realities which happen. People pass on, people get disabled to the point that they cannot be able to educate their children and give them the best of education, best of life. But there are opportunities and there are ways to do this, and that is insurance.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Augustus. Thank you, Zippy. The points you have brought about, the issues of mitigation of risks, you can avoid having risks. You can decide, you know what, I'm going to live life like an ostrich, my head in the sand, and then when risks comes, then we can cry to the Almighty. Or you can also avoid in terms of not getting into certain business sectors because they're either too risky, or you can avoid doing things in a certain way so as to just avoid the risks. The risks that cannot be avoided. The risks that are because you hire staff, you're taking on risk. You're doing business with your suppliers, with your clients, you're taking on risk. So you've got to find a way to mitigate. To, as we have said, transfer risk to somebody. You can get somebody who is a risk compliance person you can outsource, who can help you as you do your business. As day by day your business grows, he or she can be able to help you seal the holes, reduce, mitigate, and all that. And where now you can't avoid them, Kapisa, you can transfer risk. That's what we've concluded. You can transfer risk. We here at Aurum Consultants are also risk advisors. We enable our clients to be able to transfer risk using insurance. And as Mr. Augustus Kyoko has said, there are options out there. If it's involving your staff, there are statutory requirements that you have to do according to government requirements, like WIBA. You've got to take that. And then there are also others that are optional that could be beneficial, both to yourself. You can insure your assets because there are risks that your assets could be lost, could be broken down, could be stolen, and all that. That mitigation is also taken care of using insurance. So what we want to tell our business people out there who are listening to us, thank you, Eric Omondi, for your nice comments that you're enjoying our session, and all the rest who are listening to us. Remember, risk is part of life. The fact that you woke up this morning, you woke up to a risk. You woke up not knowing whether it will rain, whether it will rain na utabebwa na maji, or you'll take a glass of water ikuwe iko na mambo, or you'll take that piece of bread ikuwe iko na molds, then you are taken to hospital. So we can't avoid risk. And so it is with business. We may not be able to avoid risks, but we can intelligently, consciously, purposely, mitigate, avoid, reduce, transfer risks. The idea is, as you go, as Augustus put it very nicely, make risk management centered to your business strategy. And therefore, you will be able, I can give you an example. There's one big oil processing company here in Kenya. Let me not mention their names, but it's one of the major ones. And I remember dealing with them a while back in my place of employment. And I noted these guys, everything about their operations is based on mitigating risks. Issues to do with through their petrol stations, they're making sure they are branded petrol stations. The station manager must make sure that they have the necessary safety equipment, PPE, personal protective equipment. They have mitigated for issues to do with safety, issues to do with any kind of worker. People walking in and out, whether they are clients, whether they are staff. You have to follow a protocol. I do not know about their operational aspect, but because they're dealing with a highly flammable material, they are very, very risk conscious. And if something happens, even if uliingia ukaslide ukaanguka, that is written down to make sure that can we mitigate against that. If you are going to the loo and something happened and you fail, it is mitigated. It is written down. And through that, one of the managers, senior guys who were working in this company, was telling me, he was showing me his record back on 2015, about 2017. He's showing me his record that for 1.5 years, he has not had internal auditors coming in because of something that has happened in his station. Why? Because he took the proactive attitude of mitigating risk before they occur. So those are things we can apply in our businesses out there. If you're managing a business, if you're running your own business, if you are an employee in your business, in your workstation, sure that you're not having water poured on where you sit. Peradventure, you fall or somebody else does fall. Switches are taken care of. Those small risks, if you mitigate against them, then you avoid having major blow-ups. So thank you very much for logging in. Thank you, Augustus, for coming in to be with us to discuss this topic. I think we can have this conversation ongoing. We'll see whether we can have you soon to discuss more, because the issues of risk are very wide. And thank you, our listeners, those who logged in. Thank you for logging in. If you have any questions or comments, keep them flowing. You can connect with us through consult@aurumconsultants.co.ke. You can get in touch with us by Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube. We welcome your comments, we welcome your suggestions, we welcome your questions. We look forward to working together with you to be able to build better businesses for tomorrow. Thank you, Zippy. Thank you, Augustus. See you next week, same time, same place.
Thank you.
Thank you.